In February 2024, a Swedish company called Klarna put out a press release that every CEO in the world seemed to read. Its new AI assistant, 1 month old, had handled 2.3 million customer conversations, done the equivalent work of 700 full-time agents, and was on track to add $40 million to profits in its first year. 10 months later, Klarna's CEO went on Bloomberg television and said AI could, quote, already do all of the jobs that we, as humans, do. So here's the question this video answers. Why, just 5 months after that, was the same CEO back on Bloomberg announcing that Klarna was hiring humans again? Because he's not alone. Ford is reportedly rehiring engineers. IBM says it's tripling its US entry-level hiring. One of Australia's biggest banks cut its call center staff for an AI voice bot and had to apologize and give the jobs back. This is the story of the most public experiment in replacing people with AI, told through the company's own press releases, their CEO's own interviews with Bloomberg and CNBC, and the data now coming in from Forrester, Gartner, and MIT. The experiment has produced a result. It's just not the result anyone announced. And it means something specific for your job. Let's start with why Klarna went all in. To understand why Klarna went all in, you need to know what Klarna was going through. Klarna is a buy now, pay later company out of Stockholm, the pay in 4 installments button you've seen at checkout. At its peak in 2021, private investors valued it at $45.6 billion. 1 year later, rising inflation and interest rates had crushed the lending business, and its valuation collapsed to $6.7 billion, an 85% haircut in 12 months. In May 2022, the CEO, Sebastian Siemiatkowski, recorded a video message telling roughly 10% of his global workforce, about 700 people, that they were being let go. Keep that number in your head, 700, because it's about to come back in the strangest way. Now, and this matters, those 2022 layoffs had nothing to do with AI. That was a straightforward cost cut in a downturn. But it tells you the position Klarna was in. A fintech that had lost 85% of its value, burning cash, and desperately needing a story that said, we're a technology company, not a subprime lender, before it could go public. Then, in late 2022, ChatGPT happened, and Klarna moved faster than almost anyone. By February 2024, they had that OpenAI-powered assistant running in 23 markets, speaking more than 35 languages, 24 hours a day. And the press release wasn't shy. Customer satisfaction, on par with human agents. Repeat inquiries, down 25%. Average resolution time, under 2 minutes versus 11 minutes before. The work of 700 full-time agents, and a projected $40 million profit improvement in a single year. OpenAI's chief operating officer called Klarna the very forefront among our partners in AI adoption. Klarna wasn't just using the product, Klarna was the product demo, the proof for every board meeting in the world that this stuff was ready. And here's the thing, the numbers were probably real. The assistant genuinely was resolving the easy 2/3 of tickets, password resets, refund status, payment dates, faster than humans ever had. The question nobody asked out loud was, what exactly is in the other third? Because Klarna didn't stop at customer service. It turned the AI story into the company's entire identity. Sometime in 2023, Klarna effectively stopped net hiring. Not a layoff, nothing to announce, nothing for a headline. People left, as they always do. Tech companies lose about 20% of staff a year to normal attrition, and Klarna simply didn't replace most of them. By August 2024, Klarna was telling Reuters its AI chatbots were letting it shrink headcount. By December, Siemiatkowski put numbers on it, on Bloomberg TV. "We stopped hiring about a year ago, so we were 4,500, and now we're 3,500. 1,000 jobs, gone without a single layoff announcement. By not hiring," he said, "we're simply shrinking, right?" That's also the interview where he said AI could already do all the jobs humans do. And to his own staff, the pitch was, "The total salary cost of Klarna will shrink, and part of the gain will show up in your paycheck. Fewer people, better paid. AI does the rest." By May 2025, he was telling CNBC that AI had helped shrink the workforce by around 40%. And look, if you were running any company in 2024 and watching this, the lessons seemed obvious. Klarna had found the cheat code. So everyone started saying the quiet part loudly. April 2025. Duolingo's CEO, Luis von Ahn, posts an all-hands email publicly on LinkedIn, declaring Duolingo AI first. Contractors phased out wherever AI could do the work. Teams only allowed to hire if they could prove the work couldn't be automated. September 2025. Salesforce's Mark Benioff says it plainly on a podcast. "I was able to rebalance my headcount on my support. I've reduced it from 9,000 heads to about 5,000 because I need less heads." 4,000 support roles, with AI agents now handling half of all customer interactions. Even here in Australia, the Commonwealth Bank cut dozens of call center roles, about 45 of them, telling staff its new AI voice bot had reduced call volumes. Consulting firm Mercer surveyed executives and found 99% expected AI to trigger layoffs within 2 years. 99%. Meanwhile, the Pew Research Center found about a third of American workers feared AI would shrink their opportunities. For once, executives and workers agreed on where this was heading. There was just one problem. The flagship experiment, the one everyone was copying, was already going wrong. May the 8th, 2025. Sebastian Siemiatkowski goes back on Bloomberg, and this time the message is very different. Klarna is recruiting human customer service agents again. Here's the sentence that should be framed on the wall of every boardroom currently drafting an AI transformation memo. Quote, "As cost unfortunately seems to have been a too predominant evaluation factor when organizing this, what you end up having is lower quality. Translate that out of executive. We optimized for cheap, and the service got worse." And then the line that tells you what he was really worried about. "I just think it's so critical that you are clear to your customer that there will be always a human if you want." Klarna is a bank, or wants to be one. When your money is stuck, when a fraudulent charge lands, when a refund vanishes, an escalation loop with a chatbot doesn't just annoy you. It teaches you not to trust the institution. In banking, trust is the product. "Really investing in the quality of the human support," Siemiatkowski said, "is the way of the future for us." Now, the details of the reversal matter, because this is where the story stops being a simple pendulum swing. First, Klarna did not rehire the 1,000 people it attrited out. It launched a pilot. Siemiatkowski himself called it an Uber type of setup. Freelance agents, working remotely, choosing their own hours, starting with exactly 2 people in Sweden. Some of them, he suggested, could literally be Klarna customers. The stated goal: replace some of the thousands of outsourced workers Klarna was paying through contractors with this flexible in-house gig pool. So the humans came back, but on very different terms than the ones who left. Second, Klarna didn't abandon the AI. The same week, the company was insisting to Fortune, quote, "We're very much still AI first." And it now says the assistant does the work of more than 800 full-time agents, up from 700. A spokesperson put the new doctrine in one line: AI solves the easy stuff. Our experts handle the moments that matter. That is a very different sentence from AI can do all of the jobs humans do. And the gap between those two sentences is worth tens of millions of dollars. Here's the honest engineering read. The assistant really does clear the easy 2/3, the tickets that are basically database lookups. The mistake was assuming the remaining third was the same kind of work, just more of it. It isn't. The last third is the angry customer, the ambiguous fraud case, the ethical judgment call, the edge case no training data covered. The 2/3 the AI took was the cheapest 2/3. The third that's left is where the actual stakes live, and where a bad answer costs you a customer or a lawsuit. And in case you're wondering whether this embarrassment hurt Klarna, it didn't. In September 2025, Klarna finally got its IPO, priced at $40 a share, valuing it at $15 billion. The stock popped 30% on debut to nearly $20 billion. Both chapters of the story were, in their own moment, good PR. We replaced everyone with AI, rewarded. We're bringing humans back, also rewarded. Hold that thought for the verdict. Because what happened next wasn't a Klarna story anymore. Through late 2025 and into this year, the reversals started stacking up, quietly, across the economy. The Commonwealth Bank's voice bot? The union says call volumes went up, not down. The bot couldn't cope, and the bank rescinded the redundancies and apologized, conceding the roles weren't redundant after all. The finance sector union called it, quote, a massive win. One of Australia's biggest banks, reversed by its own chatbot. IBM automated its HR department and found the pattern almost perfectly. The AI handled 94% of routine requests beautifully and could not handle the 6% that needed judgment. IBM's CEO says AI replaced a couple of hundred HR roles, but the company hired more programmers and salespeople, and it's now planning to triple its U.S. entry-level hiring this year. Its chief HR officer explained why, with the most important workforce question of the decade. If we don't continue to invest in entry-level hires, what happens in 3 to 5 years? There's no pipeline. The well simply dries up. Ford, according to Bloomberg, has been rehiring hundreds of experienced engineers and quality inspectors because automated inspection systems missed problems humans catch. A Ford VP put it diplomatically. Artificial intelligence is a fantastic tool, but it's only as good as the information you use to train it. And Duolingo? After the backlash to that AI-first memo, Von Ahn walked it back within weeks. Now he says he doesn't see AI replacing what our employees do. He told the Financial Times, "I did not expect the amount of blowback." And then he said something revealing. Every tech company is doing similar things. We were open about it. Anecdotes, though, are cheap. So here's the data, and this is where the pattern locks in. Orgvue surveyed business leaders. 39% had made people redundant because of AI. Of those, 55% now admit those decisions were wrong. More than half. Robert Half found that 32% of U.S. hiring managers who eliminated a role because of AI have already rehired for the same or a similar position. Why? Their own answers. 40% said AI couldn't replace institutional knowledge. 38% said they underestimated how much human quality control they needed. 35% said the productivity gains simply disappointed. Gartner now predicts that half of the companies that cut customer service staff for AI will quietly rename those roles and refill them by 2027. Rename and refill. Remember that phrase, because nobody reposts a job titled, "The Role We Cut by Mistake." And underneath it all sits MIT's finding from its 2025 State of AI in Business Research. Roughly 95% of corporate generative AI pilots delivered no measurable impact on profit and loss. 5% worked. The layoffs were announced against the 5%. The workforce was sized for capabilities most companies never actually achieved. But the darkest number in this entire story comes from Forrester's 2026 predictions, and it's the one that turns this from a comedy of errors into something workers need to actually plan around. Forrester predicts half of AI-attributed layoffs will be quietly rehired, but, quote, offshore or at significantly lower salaries. Read that again. The work comes back. The paycheck doesn't. So here's my read on what actually happened. And you can disagree, but I'll give you a way to check. The AI layoffs of 2023 to 2025 were never really a technology story. They were a cost-cutting story wearing a technology costume. Klarna needed to look like an AI company to resurrect a collapsed valuation before an IPO. And it worked. The IPO happened at nearly $20 billion, with the "Hiring Humans Again" headline already public. Salesforce cut 4,000 support roles and redeployed people into sales while calling it agentic transformation. AI took the jobs was, for about 2 years, the one layoff explanation that made a company's stock go up instead of down. Executives weren't lying about the technology, exactly. They were early, loud, and paid to be optimistic. Remember, companies were laying people off for AI capabilities that didn't exist yet, betting on the promise. The technology itself did exactly what it does. It swallowed the routine 2/3 of the work brilliantly, and it hit a wall at the third that needs judgment, context, and someone to be accountable. That 2/3, 1/3 split, Klarna's chats, IBM's 94%, keeps showing up, and I suspect it's the real shape of this whole era. AI didn't replace jobs. It replaced the easy parts of jobs, and companies discovered too late that the hard parts were the job. Here's the falsifiable bit. Gartner says by the end of 2027, half of the companies that cut customer service staff for AI will have refilled those roles under new names. If that number comes in anywhere near 50%, this video called it. If almost nobody refills those roles, if the bots just keep getting better and the humans stay gone, then I was wrong, and the 2024 CEOs were right, just early. Watch what companies do in 2027, not what they announce this year. And the practical takeaway, because if you work for a living, this story is about you. The single most cited reason employers gave for rehiring wasn't warmth or PR. It was institutional knowledge. The stuff about how your company actually works that never got written down. That's the asset AI can't ingest and an offshore replacement doesn't have. So the resilient position in this economy isn't person who competes with the AI. It's the person who runs the AI and owns the context. The escalation cases, the edge cases, the 6%. And if your role does get cut because of AI, the data says roughly 1 in 3 of those roles comes back within a couple of years, usually cheaper, often renamed. That's worth knowing before you sign anything, and before you assume the machine actually could do your job. Statistically, it couldn't. 700 agents worth of work, $40 million, and one very public U-turn later. That's what the world's flagship AI workforce experiment actually proved. If this kind of story is useful to you, what actually happened from the filings and the numbers, not the hype, there's more coming. Consider subscribing. See you in the next one.